Part 159. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1586. Gretel was rolled behind the top of the mage tower, staggered back, and stood upright. He didn't know what was happening yet, but when he heard Elder Batiste roaring, he lowered his head and looked at his front in confusion. What's wrong with me? This is me. The hem of my clothes, the hem below the hem, the two pockets at the bottom, and the button in the middle of the placket, all disappeared. One by one, they all disappeared. There was only a huge hole left. The edge of the hole was black, brittle, and charred, as if it had been hit by a fireball or had a cup of strong acid poured on it. You know, these are no ordinary clothes. Ordinary cotton clothes, or ordinary silk, etc., will be ruined after being washed dozens of times. This is a magic robe. It is a level 6 magical creature, a magic robe woven from the cashmere of the alpine blue-horned ice sheep. It has its own magic power from the moment the raw material appears in the world. Magic robe with self-cleaning function, warm in winter and cool in summer, anti-cut, stab-proof and fire-proof. Even if he wears such a robe every day, for 20 or 30 years, it will not be damaged. After all, he would not go on adventures or go to the battlefield wearing such a magic robe, he would only wear it in the laboratory. I didn't want to do anything to him. From the opposite side, a strange dragon roar followed. He was a little confused, somewhere between not waking up and being in a daze, but also a little anxious. I just want to see him clearly, and what if he gets older? As long as I'm here, even if he dies of old age and turns into ashes, I can still get him back from the river of time. What are you talking about? A clear, anxious voice suddenly sounded from the tower of the mage tower. Immediately afterwards, a ray of silver light flew out and stood high on the top of the tower. Sarah stood in front of Gretel with great vigilance. What are you going to do to Gretel? Are you going to make him older? No. Grandpa Batista. Grandpa Batista. Cough, cough, it's okay. Don't worry, it's okay as long as I'm here. Elder Batista had no choice but to speak out. Signs is just taking a look. He has no ill intentions. He was just surprised and didn't fully control his power. It won't happen again, right, Sains? Signs. Interesting, interesting. The time dragon did not answer, but rose up a little, looking attentively at Gretel and Cyrilla, who was standing in front of him. A pair of dragon eyes continued to ripple with thin colors, woven into an hourglass shape from time to time, turning over and over again, over and over again. It's really interesting. This little girl has very strong traces of being influenced by you. It can almost be said that she was dragged by you to move forward in the river of time. His voice was hollow, as if he had seen Cyrilla, but also as if he had not seen her. There was no reflection of the silver dragon girl's figure in his hourglass-shaped pupils. Sarah took 2 steps back nervously, almost leaning on Gretel, still holding her arms open to block Gretel. I'm fine. I'm normal. Gretel and I have always been together. We take adventures and research together, and we will advance quickly. Isn't this what it should be? It's okay, it's normal. Greet took a half step forward, pulled down her arm, and interlocked with her fingers. The other hand went around her waist, hugging her hard, and rested his chin on her shoulder. We have always been together, and we will be together until legend, for a long time. Sarah, don't be afraid, nothing will happen to us. Tisk, mortal things. Time Dragon Sains was not interested in the silver dragon girl's reaction or the way the young couple cuddled together. He turned around and observed Gretel from the other side. The more he looked, the more focused he became. Gradually, he was about to poke his head over again, but was smacked back by the tail of Elder Batista, who was catching up. Hey, boy, What have you done? I see strong traces of time in you. There are many people and things, changed because of you. Gretel's right arm was wrapped around Cyrilla, and his left hand was holding her left hand. He scratched the back of her hand with his thumb over and over again, trying to comfort the slightly frightened silver dragon girl. He deliberately refused to answer the time dragon's question. It would be too silly to report his resume on the top of the mage tower, and he was afraid of offending the other party, so he looked at Elder Batista for help. The elder smiled and nodded. Okay, let the kids come down first. You can restrain yourself a little bit, and let's find a place to sit down and talk slowly, okay? I maintain this form so that I can more easily peer into the river of time. Sains continued to answer vaguely. He lowered his height a little, took a look at the bottom of the mage tower, then backed out a few hundred meters, and simply turned around. The time dragon is not afraid of strong people, especially not mortal objects, but it does not like to stay with mortal objects. The eyes of the time dragon can directly see through the passage of time and witness the death of all living things. The girl's beautiful cheeks were withered and shriveled, her slim figure was bent, and her bright silk robe was shattered into dust. Even for this mage tower, what he saw in his eyes was the scene of the magic circle disintegrating, the rocks turning into ash, the tower toppling, small trees sprouting on the base of the tower, and wild foxes making their nests among the rocks. In this mage tower, there are so many magicians standing at the windows to visit, and so many curious faces looking at his face. In the eyes of the time dragon, if you don't pay attention, you can see dry and decaying skeletons one by one. As for those undead creatures, in his eyes, they have basically turned into dust. No one likes to see death and decay every day, so as they grow older, time dragons will become more and more withdrawn, farther and farther away from people and society. Living in that desolate snowy gobi, at any rate, when he was observing the flow of time, the scene around him would not change much. Snowfields are always snowfields, and rocks are always rocks. Whether it's a strong wind, a blizzard, or rolling rocks on the Gobi Desert, the situation is the same. Suddenly, another person falls down and dies. Of course, the Dragon Clan is slightly better, and the legendary Dragon Clan is better. Basically, in his eyes, there won't be much change. And this time, there are actually 2 or 3 exceptions in the entire Mage Tower. That put Sains in a slightly better mood. He retreated a few hundred meters, then another few hundred meters, and simply retreated to the back of a hill, facing the cliff, so as to be as out of sight as possible and out of mind. After pausing for a while, Gretel finally came to him with procrastination under the persuasion and companionship of Elder Batista. Cyrilla insisted on following him, her face full of vigilance, holding his arm and not letting go, ready to rush in front of Greet at any time and block him with her body. Sains didn't care and said softly, "Little guy, can you tell me your previous experiences, especially the big things you did?" "Don't you want Sains to help you predict?" Elder Batista quickly added. "Time dragons have a pair of eyes that can see the flow of time. They make prophecies much easier and at a much lower cost than ordinary prophets. Take a good shot of his horse. Make him satisfied. To his satisfaction, there are as many things as prophecies that you want." Oh, Gretel became interested. "Then Mr. Sains, is it easy for you to see whether a baby dragon that hatches in half a year has wisdom?" Snort. The time dragon snorted lightly. To Greet's ears, it sounded a bit arrogant, which was equivalent to saying, "This is not a problem at all to me." His eyes lit up, he squeezed Cyrrilla's hand tightly and pulled her aside. "Your Excellency Sains, I am willing to tell you my experience. Correspondingly, I also hope that you can lend a helping hand and help me look at the results of my experiments. After all, this is also for the benefit of the Dragon Clan." Time Dragon Sains snorted again, non-committal. Gretel shook Cyrilla's hand, cleared his throat, and began to state. As for the earliest event you want to see, it is probably after I was brought into the plasticity department. I handed over a lot of systematic knowledge to the magicians in Thunderhorn. As he told the story, the river of time in Sainz's eyes began to flow slowly, splashing out waves from time to time. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. When he talked about the events in the kingdom of Eagle, the events in the kingdom of the Sun, the secret realm of the Elves, and the treatment of the great prince of the Elves, the waves from the river of time flew high, almost dragging the river turned a corner. That's it, it turns out that's it? Time Dragon Sainz kept mumbling. Sure enough, although this little guy is not strong, the changes he brings are quite significant. Many indigenous gods, demigods, and legends had their fates changed by his actions. Just like the indigenous sun god, his original destiny would be completely extinguished and swallowed up by the legend of the glorious Holy Sea. Once the sun god goes out, the fate of the entire land he shines on, and the people in that large land, will completely change. As for the elf secret realm, the pollution in that place was repaired. Although it affected not many humans, it had an unexpectedly huge impact on the course of the world. Interesting, really interesting. Time Dragon Sainz was so excited that his scales trembled slightly. Such a person who will influence the river of time, may not be seen for hundreds or even thousands of years. The last one I saw seemed to be the great magician who led the magicians out of the kingdom of Kent and established the Magic Council. He built the Tower of Babel with his own hands, opened up a world for the Magic Council, entered the legend himself, and is still active in this world today. It's a pity that the old man's stirring of time has become less and less. And now, he discovered another such existence. Sainz took a deep breath. He stood up straight, restrained the flow of time around him, and looked at Gretel seriously. Where are the things you want to predict? Take me there. Stay by his side. Be sure to wait a little longer. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1587. This egg? This egg won't work. Time Dragon Sainz turned into a thin man wearing a dark grey robe, with a stern face and wandering steps in the laboratory. Look at it, shake your head, look at it again, shake your head again. Gretel was holding a notebook and followed him step by step, making notes. It was impossible not to follow him. All the necromancers who tried to talk to him were ignored by the Time Dragon. Until now, the Time Dragon was only willing to respond to his own demands. Only when Sarala and senior sister Philby were talking, the Time Dragon was willing to answer a few words. As for the necromancers and other magicians in the Mage Tower, although Time Dragon Sainz didn't say anything, everyone could see his disgusting attitude very clearly. You mortals, it's best to get away and don't appear in front of me. In view of the powerful power and noble status of the Time Dragon, as well as the power of time that will burst out at any time, everyone consciously avoided it and tried not to be in the same room with him. As for the research task, just leave it to the Mage Nordmark. Gretel is very happy. This Lord Time Dragon is worthy of being a dragon with the talent of breathing time, swallowing time, and swimming in time. His prophecy skills are simply amazing. There is no need to open the great magic circle like Lady Ender in the Star Dome, require the entire mystery lock to provide energy for her, and require the assistance of a large group of disciples. There is no need to use magic arrays, magic materials, spices, and jewelry like the elders of the Elves who practice prophecy. Another long chant of incantations, another prayer to Lady Silvery Moon. This guy just needs to calmly walk past the dragon egg hatchery and take a calm look. Eyes that can see through the long river of time can naturally see clearly the fate of these dragon beast eggs after they hatch. Will it be able to hatch safely, or will it die on the way? After hatching, will it be strong or weak, will its mental power be strong or absent? In this nest of eggs, who is the strongest one or the weakest one? Sains can see it at a glance. And, in his words, isn't it only a few months ago? Just look at the situation in a few months and glance at it. It's not hundreds of years later. Okay, really okay, you are the boss, you have the final say. Greed was speechless and could only carefully accompany the Lord Time Dragon, walking forward step by step, looking at the dragon egg nests one by one. That is, after laying down dragon eggs and dragon beast eggs to hatch, it is best not to dig them out or disturb the nest. Otherwise, Gretel could really make the magicians roll up their sleeves and work, get out all the dragon eggs, hold them one by one, and walk them through in front of Sains. This one won't work either. What aspect is bad? Gretel looked at him carefully. Sains had already retracted his gaze, walked forward quickly, and answered matter-of-factly. Too weak. Apart from being hatched, there is nothing to mention. Then is it stronger than other young dragons of the same period? Please, help me take a closer look, this is very important. Gretel quickened his pace, half blocking the time dragon, and begged him hard. These experimental results are very helpful for us to adjust the experimental plan in the future. It can greatly advance the progress of the experiment. It is of great benefit to the dragon clan. Please be sure to take a closer look. Sains walked forward with a face that was more paralyzed than indifferent, with unfocused eyes and a dazed expression. It wasn't until he saw Gretel that his eyes focused a little more and he stared at him carefully. What did you say? I said, these experimental results can greatly advance the progress of the experiment. Gretel gritted his teeth and repeated what he said before. Damn it, is this what a race that has been immersed in the river of time is like? Will the scenes he sees and the sounds he hears always be different from normal people? That shouldn't be the case, right? Should, when the other party tries to control themselves, they can still communicate normally, right? At least, during the conversation just now, the dazzling color in the eyes of the time dragon seemed to be a little thinner, and behind the hourglass-like pupils, the shadow of a more normal vertical pupil appeared. Indeed so. When Gretel talked about his needs, time dragon Sains saw the slight fluctuations of the time river on his body. It was this kind of fluctuation that made him willing to go back and take another look. This one is boring. This one is not interesting either. This one is different. Huh, Greet quickly flipped through the record book in his hand. 5 silver -3 -2 dragon egg, that is to say, the 5th batch of silver dragon egg, the 3rd set of experimental plans, and the number 2 egg. This experimental plan happens to use electric shock to fuse fertilized eggs and unfertilized eggs to enhance the amount of material available to the fertilized eggs so that the fertilized eggs have sufficient strength. This one is different. Does that mean this research direction is correct? Why is this one different? It splashes more water. Time Dragon Sains narrowed his eyes slightly, and the hourglass in his eyes started to rotate again. It's different from other eggs, it should be more important, that is, according to you, it can advance the progress of the experiment. So this is how you see it? Instead of looking at whether it will survive, how much it will weigh after hatching, how strong it will be, and how it is alive, you just look at the splash it makes in the river of time. Gretel really couldn't complain. However, no matter how powerless he was to complain, he could only stay with his smiling face and try his best to plead with His Excellency Time Dragon. In this case, please take a closer look. Can you directly see the picture after it was born? Please take a closer look at its situation after birth, especially the measurements we made for it. Length, weight, strength, food intake, various indicators. Please take a closer look and read it to me. Time Dragon Sains was silent for a moment. However, looking at the increasingly violent river of time beside Gretel, he still turned his face and stared at the dragon egg. The hourglass in his eyes turned faster and faster, and the colorful light around him began to fluctuate. Obviously, To accurately locate this point in time and see more details, for him, it is not as simple as just take a look. Length: 9 feet, tail length. 3 feet, weight: 537 kilograms, it is the largest among the hatchlings. Gripping strength, wing beat strength, tail sweeping strength. Greet recorded excitedly. Thank God, the data is finally available. It feels so good to see the results in advance. If there is a time when the light dragon is around, it means that the experiment has been opened, and you don't have to wait anymore. Where are the other eggs in the same clutch? Can you take a look? You don't have to look at them one by one. Just look at the table. The data from the same clutch will definitely be sorted into one table. Read it, please read it read. This is going too far, right? Sains was speechless. However, in the face of Greet's request, he still took it seriously and read all the data on the form. Obviously, it is basically not difficult for the time dragon to use a certain dragon egg as an anchor, push back a few months, and then look at the scene near this fixed point in time. This is all practiced over a long period of time. The daily life of the time dragon is to peek into time and take pleasure in it. Otherwise, the days in the remote wilderness would be too lonely. They often scatter their treasures, gold coins, jewelry, magic equipment, weapons, etc., things that are not easy to perish or rot, to all parts of the world and to every corner of time. Let these things wash away over a long period of time, and then pick them up from every corner of time. Lie down in your own dragon's nest, one by one, watch the traces of the flow of time on these treasures, and watch all kinds of bizarre events happening around them. If you have done these things a lot, it will not be difficult to see the trajectory after the dragon egg. In contrast, it is more difficult to read out the densely packed words and numbers on the form without making any mistakes, which tests your patience. Thank you. Thank you so much. About half an hour later, the record book in Gretel's hand was already in a mess, with a thick stack of information written down. Basically, he copied the forms from a few months later. He bowed and invited the time dragon Sains out of the experimental side of the nature order. He took a step back and quickly handed the record book to Anivia. Quick! Give it to everyone. Copy, discuss, compare, and then continue to refine based on the few plans that are successful in the experiment, and move on to the next step. After speaking, he quickened his pace, hurriedly followed, and led Sains towards the mage tower. Enter the tower, go down the stairs, and go into the basement. Here. Here. Please come and see these 2 eggs. These are dragon beast eggs infused with dragon soul. We are conducting experiments. After injecting dragon soul, the hatched eggs can gain wisdom and can transform from dragon beasts into dragons. This project is approved by the Dragon Clan. Please be sure take a look. Sains glanced quickly. Then, with a twitching brow, he quickly walked to one of the eggs, held the railing next to the egg nest, and leaned down. Crack click. The railing, which was made of fine steel and could usually accommodate 3 necromancers stacked on top of it, cracked and was shattered by him. Sains didn't seem to notice at all, his body trembled slightly, he reached out and touched the dragon egg, and then touched it again. Roar! A giant dragon dozens of meters long suddenly appeared. Before it even raised its head, spread its wings, or even swung its tail, it filled the entire incubation room. In the huge basement, the chandeliers fell down, the magic lines on the walls groaned and shattered, and the tables, chairs, cabinets, and various magic equipment in the room were pushed aside by the dragon body. Gretel rolled and crawled to the ground to escape. Your Excellency Sains, please take it easy. Your Excellency Sains. Thanks, I still don't know how to name the 100 starting coins for the reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1588. It was too late, but it was too late. Sirrah grabbed Gretel, turned around and ran away. She tugged on her right hand and jumped forward, her left arm already wrapped around Greet's waist, and she kicked the ground hard at the same time. There was an explosion on the floor, and the two hugged each other and rushed out of the mage tower like a sharp arrow. At the same time, in the mage tower, beep 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 beep, the extremely high, sharp, and tragic alarm sounded, from the highest floor to the second underground floor, like a steel drill. Down. Bang bang bang, ping ping pong, the necromancers, as well as the magicians on the upper floors, scrambled to escape. That's a dragon. It's the time dragon. So far, no one in the mage tower knows how to resist the power of time erosion. I didn't notice that the mage Nordmark was accidentally hit once. Although it only hit the front, the hem of the mage's robe was completely gone. If anyone here were to touch him head on, who can say that it wouldn't be the same as that mage's robe, and it would be gone? Escape. Don't take anything, leave all the experiments and everything behind, and run away. It doesn't matter if the experimental equipment explodes, it doesn't matter if the mage tower explodes, but if the people are gone, then everything is gone. By the way, try to run on two legs and don't use magic. Who knows what strange situations will occur when magic is interfered with by the power of time. For a time, the mage tower was in chaos. The necromancers opened their arms, with a skeleton on one side, and they ran outside supported by the skeleton. The transformation mages throw out the golem, which is carried on its back, held on its back, or carried out of the window, and quickly glides outward. The conjuration magician should be bolder and call out various magic horses and phantom colts, and let the mount carry him outside. The plastic energy department at the top gives everyone more time to react, and everyone is more courageous. He rushed towards the window immediately, then, with an explosion of air, he pushed himself out and flew out. Fly far away and then glide. Let's use the feather falling technique again. In short, as long as the distance is far away, you shouldn't be afraid. There was chaos and chaos for a while. When Time Dragon Sains came back to his senses, all that was left was a trampled shoe, a few skeleton leg bones, dozens of things that might be skeleton foot bones and toe bones, and two skulls sliding around in the corner. As for the living creatures, apart from the two dragon eggs in front of me, there are only a few floors above where there are the breaths of life of individual experimental animals. Sains. Nordmark Mage. Nordmark, Mage. Where are people? He tried to turn his head, and there was a swishing and clicking sound above his head. Turn your body again, and behind you there will be a crashing sound, a clanging sound, a booming sound, and a crackling sound. There were sounds of wood cracking, things big and small falling, glass breaking, and even small explosions. Ah, by the way, I am in dragon body state now. I had agreed when I came in before that we should try not to use the dragon shape. This mage tower is not large enough, nor is it high enough, so it is not very strong. Time Dragon Sains looked down at himself, quickly shrunk a bit, then shrunk a bit more, and finally returned to human form. Then, the power of time in his body swayed slightly, and he skillfully bypassed the two dragon eggs in front of him, and quickly scanned the ceiling, floor, walls, and the messy tables, chairs, and cabinets. Well, very good, everything that needs to be cleaned up has been cleaned up, and everything that needs to be restored has been restored. Those that were trampled by me, cracked by me, and swept away by my tail were all repaired and perfected, as if nothing had happened. Well, mastering the power of time is all about convenience, and you never have to cry over spilled milk because it will still go back into the cup. Ah! Outside the mage tower, a certain necromancer screamed and fell to the ground. On the left and on the right, the two skeletons holding him flying disappeared. Come back. I will never despise you anymore. One lost a leg bone, the other lost a soul, and ran away with a poke. Don't leave me. Don't panic. This is the return of the power of time. Mr. Sains has repaired the inside. So, we can go back. Maybe. Your Excellency Sains. Mr. Time Dragon Sains. Can we come in? Is it safe inside? Time Dragon Sains moved his shoulders comfortably and once again moved his gaze to the dragon egg in front of him. Ah, it's so beautiful. No matter how many times I see it, the scene of the waves splashing in the river of time and engulfing me is still so beautiful. Look at it again, look at it again. It's confirmed, when this dragon beast egg hatched, it awakened its true name. Have wisdom. Although it was too small, too weak, and stumbling, after crawling out of the egg, it only ate half of its own eggshell for the first meal. It looked like it was stunted, and the possibility of dying in the future was not small. Sains sets his sights on the other side of the river of time. As expected, this young dragon was raised by magicians in a stumbling manner, with various healing spells and various magical beast meats, but it still died within a few months. From its body, a weak but complete dragon soul floated vaguely for a while, and was gathered in the center by a pair of skinny hands. Died. He didn't accomplish anything, he didn't even survive the hatchling stage safely, and he died. But, that's a dragon. It's a dragon. From the dragon egg, a real dragon hatched. This has never happened before. This is something that no giant dragon has ever done in the tens of thousands of years of dragon clan history. Even if a dragon soul is stuffed into a dragon egg, a real dragon has never hatched. As long as this technology is successful, even if a disabled or useless dragon is hatched, it will still point the way in the right direction. After that, as long as you modify, and modify again, one day, this technology can make the dead dragons come back as a new life. No longer need to be limited by lifespan, no longer need to suffer the pain of soul decay. Moreover, the dragon clan can also get strong young dragons, instead of giving birth once, hatching eggs once, and waiting expectantly for a dragon beast. No wonder, no wonder. Such a weak little dragon that died young will still stir up huge waves in the river of time. As a landmark successful sample, its birth is meaningful enough. This dragon egg, succeeded. The time dragon Sains turned into an afterimage, rolled out like the wind, and rushed to greet. With a strong fist, he grabbed Gretel's mage robe. This is the road. This is the right road. As long as you follow this road, you can hatch healthy baby dragons with sufficient potential. Hey 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 hey. Greet's hands and feet were dancing wildly. He was wrapped around the waist by Cyrilla and led away as he ran away. His whole body was tilted, basically at a 60-degree angle to the ground. Just as he stopped, before he could stand firmly and before he could adjust his posture, the time dragon rushed out and grabbed him again. Let me go. Let me go. Let me stand up straight. If you have anything to say, let me stand up straight before you speak. He struggled desperately and finally got free and stood on the ground. Time Dragon Sains looked at him with burning eyes. The pair of hourglasses in his eyes had disappeared. In his dark gray eyes, 1, 2, 3, and 4 were reflected. There are countless figures of him, some are teenagers, some are young, some are older, some are standing in front of the mage tower, some are standing in the hospital, some are standing in the endless starry sky. Layers upon layers, vacillating, and constantly changing. Grow taller, grow older, assume dragon form, return to human form. Gretel was instantly terrified. Mr. Sains, what are you doing? Are you dragging everyone in the river of time? You know, every step I take in the future is based on my current choices, not the clips you see and intercept in the long river of time. You can bully me all you want, but don't change my future. He took a step back, then another step, and another step, until he felt a warmth on his back and leaned against Cyrilla's chest. He was unable to retreat and stopped. Time Dragon Sains couldn't wait to ask. What are you going to do next? How are you going to do it? Come on, tell me. Well. Gretel was sweating on his forehead. He does have the next experimental plan in mind, but it only has a simple structure. After being questioned by the Time Dragon, he will probably get to the bottom of it. In desperation, he waved and called over several necromancers who were looking around. They will be responsible for this project next. Archmage Vadim, please state the next experimental plan and ask Mr. Sains for guidance. Archmage Vadim's eyes lit up and he quickly stepped forward. They escaped in a hurry this time, and many materials and records were not at hand. But as one of the people in charge of Black Crow Swamp, he can naturally talk about these contents without reading them. Next, our idea is to transform the dragon eggs so that they can better adapt to the dragon soul. The transformation direction is mainly divided into two ideas. The first is to improve the overall body of the dragon egg to make it stronger to adapt to the stronger dragon soul. The second is to carry out targeted chromosome enhancement on the dragon egg so that its brain develops better and it can obtain stronger the mental power. Time Dragon Sains frowned and listened. While listening, his eyes were wandering, looking around, but not focusing on Archmage Vadim. Gretel stood nearby and sighed secretly. Judging from Sir Sains's attitude, this Archmage Vadim probably has no hope of becoming a legend. A lifetime of hard work, a lifetime of struggle, but in the end, there is no way to escape that day. Fortunately, Time Dragon did not refuse to communicate because of this. After listening for a long time, he suddenly took a big step and walked towards the Mage Tower. After taking a few steps, he suddenly paused again. Where are the dragon eggs? On the other side, Gretel quickly caught up. Come on, follow me, look at these dragon eggs, observe and listen to them. Thanks to Ed for the 500 starting coins. Thanks to Ed Book Friend 2021002210138902 for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1589. Our main methods for dealing with dragon eggs are: in the fertilized egg stage, the fertilized egg is strengthened through electrical pulses and other methods. During the pregnancy stage, provide the female dragon with more and richer nutrients to help the dragon eggs develop. In the incubation stage, Archmage Vadim pointed at the rows and rows of dragon eggs and tried his best to explain, while trying his best to control himself from foaming at the mouth and splashing on the face of Time Dragon Sains. Well, although people may not really care, they will really take revenge. But what if? What if it takes a while? He can't afford it? Time Dragon Sains really didn't pay attention to such trivial matters as the opponent's saliva. He stared at those dragon eggs with all his heart, and all his energy was used to pay attention to the changes in the eggs. Pay attention to every change in the color of the eggshell, pay attention to every extension of the eggshell's texture, pay attention to every shake of the eggshell, and most importantly, pay attention to every ripple of the river of time on those dragon eggs. So you see. Archmage Vadim finally memorized the entire research plan and asked cautiously. Gretel stood on the other side of the Time Dragon, holding his breath and pricking up his ears. Hey, give me some directions. Give us a forecast direction and it will save us a lot of trouble. So much research, so much inquiry, so many times holding your breath, adjusting chromosome points bit by bit, so many dragon eggs, the energy supply value rises 0.1 grid, 0.1 grid, 0.1 grid. How many times do you have to fail before you succeed once? How many resources must be wasted, dozens or hundreds of times of resources must be thrown in order to push the possible path of success forward by such a small step and lay such a cornerstone? It would be much easier and more enjoyable, everyone, if the light dragon could show me the way sometimes. However, Sains was silent for a long time, so silent that Greet thought he was about to fall asleep, or that he was drowning in the river of time and had forgotten what was happening at the moment. Only then did the Lord Time Dragon speak in a dumb voice. I can't see it. What? I can't see it? Their future is too messy. The ripples of time on the dragon egg are extremely thin and complex, one by one, intertwined together. In his experience, this situation usually means that there are many tributaries of time in front of the object he is observing, and they are changing too fast. And this object may step into any tributary at any time. Considering that this is just a dragon egg, it is too affected by external forces and cannot be its active choice. There is not much value in observing it now. But those two eggs before, weren't you? Their future has been decided, Time Dragon Sane said without changing his face. Once the future is decided, it is easier to observe. Unlike these, just staring at it now is a waste of energy. Every operation and every adjustment of the instruments by the humans walking around them will stir up tiny ripples of time around the dragon egg, pushing it closer or farther away from a certain tributary. For these operations, it's okay if they are few. Time Dragon still likes to observe a particularly small movement, which has a huge impact on the object it observes. However, there were 7, 8, 10, or dozens of movements in a row. Sometimes, the same action, if performed slightly differently, can have a hugely different effect. You need to observe their separate effects, but also the effects of their combination. It's so complicated that it makes your eyes dizzy and gives you a headache. Greet nodded silently. Then, he coughed and turned to the necromancers. Did you all hear that? According to your previous plan, start the operation. Pay attention to the technique and the accuracy of the operation. After all operations are completed, please invite Mr. Sains for inspection. Therefore, it must be done in reality to have an impact on the dragon egg, and it will be easier for the time dragon to observe its changes. If you want to cheat, if you want to directly let him make a judgment based on the plan, it still doesn't work. Necromancers, nature priests, and other spellcasters, roll up your sleeves and get to work. By the way, you can't neglect the care of the manipulated dragon eggs. There can be no negligence. Only by taking good care of them and allowing them to hatch safely can Your Excellency Time Dragon see the correct results. Yes. Clear. The magicians scattered with a crash. It's terrible, it's terrible. Now I have to work overtime until I die. It turns out that it takes 2 months to operate a batch of dragon eggs and another 6 months for them to hatch. There is nothing too complicated in this process. You can be lazy, fish, and do the experiments you want to do. Now, it takes 2 months to operate a batch of dragon eggs, let the time dragon see it, and then the next batch will be operated immediately. The original dragon eggs, the care work, and the measurement work cannot be put down. It's like the workload suddenly tripled, no, quadrupled. Even if the work of taking care of dragon eggs is slightly easier than the work of operating, it is at least 2 to 2.5 times longer. There are no vacations, no overtime pay, and no allowances. Help. The necromancers went to work desperately with the mood of as long as they can't die, they will die. Gretel took a long breath, wiped his face, and turned to the time dragon again. Mr. Sains, please. Visit from top to bottom, from the laboratory on the highest floor of the master tower to the second underground floor at the bottom. However, Time Dragon Sains said almost nothing, except for a few dragon eggs that allowed him to take a second look, and occasionally made a comment, but did not even look at those magic equipment and magic instruments. In his words, "I can't see the ripples of time from these dead objects." You can't do this. Your prediction skills need to be improved. Greet looked sideways. Technology like microscopy and electron microscopy is qualified to win the Nobel Prize. In other words, its existence will change the entire research field and thus the world. Although its change in the world is relatively indirect, it requires the efforts of many researchers, the accumulation of a lot of knowledge, and the jump of many steps, but it really has this effect. Take a look at the microscope, take a look at the gel electrophoresis, take a look at the chromosome enhancer, take a look, and then they all say you can't see the ripples of time. Your observation of time still needs to be improved. Your Excellency Sains, would you like to hear me tell a story? A story, about how I successfully saved a plague. Gretel had to roll up his sleeves and die personally. He took out an optical microscope and several sets of items from his collection, Escherichia coli, Shigella dysenteriae, penicillin. You see, through this method, I successfully saved a plague, but this work started when the microscope could see them, so, on the microscope, can you see the ripples of time? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1590. Time Dragon Sane stared at Gretel without blinking and said nothing. When Greed talked about his previous experiences, he had seen such ripples of time, but he could not see them clearly at that time. At this moment, Greed explained in detail how to make a microscope, how to observe bacteria under a microscope, how to use observation and experiments to verify the essence of the plague, how to find the source and contain the plague. Along with these narrations, his eyes penetrated the river of time and came to the moment when things just happened. The colorful river of time, at that moment, created a small wave with the mage in front of him as the center. That was hundreds of people, thousands of people, whose destinies were changed by the actions of this mage. At that moment, the waves were sparkling and dazzling. It was the most beautiful and charming scene in the calmly flowing river of time. But he shook his head very slowly. I can see the traces of time on your body. This, he pointed to the microscope in Greet's hand. No. Why? Well, I haven't done what you said. Gretel. Well, the microscope he brought out was not the one he had made in Heartland City to observe Shigella dysentery bacteria. The craftsmanship of an alchemist is countless times better than that of a jeweler in a small city. The microscope itself is also iterated, and the one in his hand is already in its 5th edition. As for the microscope used in the Mage Tower, the one the magicians brought from Nevis is already the 10th or 11th edition, and it has nothing to do with the original edition. In this case, I will take you to take a look at our chromosome detection, positioning, and transformation integrated device. Greet decided to try again. He took the time dragon around and came to Huasca's dragon lair. The huge magic array still stands quietly, deep underground, connected to the energy supply system of the dragon's nest. Only the core microscope has been removed. This is it. Using this magic circle and related facilities, we have given dragon blood to hundreds of intelligent creatures. Can you see the traces of time on this? Time Dragon Sane stared at the magic circle, looking hard, and looking hard again. After a long moment, he shrugged and snorted. It's barely a point, after all, those whose fates were changed are not great people. And the speed of giving dragon blood is very slow. One for a few days, one for a few days, one for a few days. Time dragged on for a very long time, and the person who was transformed was not an earth-shattering guy, nor would he do anything earth-shattering. Except for the first one that was transformed, which proved that this technology is successful and has potential, and caused a bigger wave, the following ones, hum. A little ripple, then a little more ripple, and then a little more ripple, there is no value in observation at all. Gretel was silent. Okay, so the time dragon's observation of the time river is not infinite, or in other words, the time dragon's observation ability is not unlimited. He needs at least an anchor point, or in other words, a symbolic person, thing, or place. Center on this sign, push forward, push back, and see everything you want to see. As for a microscope, or a microelectron microscope, as long as it is not the first in the world or one that participated in a decisive event, he will not be able to see the ripples of time on it. There is no way to follow the connection between similar equipment and touch the crucial one, for example, the one that participated in the treatment of the great prince of the elves and changed his chromosomes. Well, I think you can give it a try. Gretel scratched his head and tried to explain to the time dragon. Observation of the river of time is not necessarily limited to direct observation. Perhaps we can also locate that point in time through indirect jumps. For example, from this microscope and electron microscope, go back to the time when it was manufactured, then fix the location and find the key microscope and electron microscope. Follow it to locate that critical moment. Well. Time Dragon Sains narrowed his eyes slightly. He followed the direction of Greet's finger and stared at the magic circle in front of him and the obviously lighter colored ground in the center of the magic circle. That's where the electron microscope once stood. It has been left there for many years, covering up the dust falling from the top of the cave and the dust kicked up by people coming and going, leaving a circle of obvious marks around it. Time spun back in Sains's eyes, until a strange-looking magic device appeared there, the same magic device that Greet once showed him in the Mage Tower. Then use this magic device as an anchor point to go back to the day and place when this device was created. No, it's a bit difficult. The energy in that place is too strong, under the shroud of the mystery, the nearby energy fluctuations are too strong and the interference is too great, even the river of time is not unaffected by anything. Roar. He groaned softly, and the light and shadow around him suddenly skyrocketed. Gretel quickly stepped back, and saw his true form appearing in the dragon's lair. The dozens of meters long dragon lay down, motionless, staring ahead. Is it still too reluctant to peer into the river of time in human form and jump from one anchor point to another? Or do you want to return to dragon form? Tisk, that's pretty good. Isn't this a goal? Isn't there something to work towards? How can you make progress if you lie around lazily all day long and do nothing? The time dragon set off a storm in the dragon's nest, and the powerful energy rolled through the walls of the dragon's nest and hit the defensive array of the dragon's nest. In the Sky Dragon City, Vasca suddenly stood up and said, Who is messing around in my dragon's lair? Is it an enemy? Or is it a thief? He roared loudly and looked down. However, the war was tense recently, so he could not leave his post without authorization, so he had to shout. Yelena! Yelena! Sister! Help me to find out what happened to my dragon's nest. If it doesn't work, ask the guardian leaders of my parents to go over and take a look. As a silver dragon who was born with the power of healing, even though Yelena's main attack direction was not magic, she was still assigned to work in the support team, which gave her a little more leeway than Vasca's job. Asked by her brother, she dialed the communication between Sky Dragon City and the ground. This is the magic circle that every dragon clan who is qualified to work above will have in the dragon nest, so that they can keep track of the situation in the dragon nest at any time, and asked here's Wasker's captain of the guard. Ah, it's Master Nordmark. He has brought His Excellency the Time Dragon Sains to the Master's dragon nest to watch the transformation magic circle on the other side of the communication, Vasca's most capable family member replied respectfully. According to the Master's previous order, Master Nordmark has the right to enter the Master's dragon lair at any time. They did not enter the treasure room, did not touch any of the Master's treasures, and did not activate the magic circle to absorb energy, so I did not stop them. Well. Calm down, that's the Time Dragon, that's the time dragon. Time dragons have no habit of coveting worldly treasures. They prefer their own treasures that are soaked in the power of time, and Master Nordmark is his sister's fiancé and a distinguished guest of the dragon clan. Yelena fed back the news, and Vaska had nothing to say. He could only hum and scratch the ground of Dragon City in the sky, which was made up of clouds and light, causing the ground to ripple with colorful light. Let them go out after reading this. If nothing happens in the future, don't come to my dragon's lair. It's not like you don't have a mage tower, so don't always touch my territory. Humph. In the dragon's nest, Time Dragon Sains was lying on the ground, motionless, and his two pupils had completely turned into hourglass shapes. Around the body, charcoal black scales cling to the flesh and blood, overflowing with light, and the strange brilliance keeps spinning. Work harder. Work harder. If you work harder, you can see it. It is really troublesome to go from this microscope to its production site and then to another microscope, especially during the positioning process. We are often disturbed, often by legendary power. It's so troublesome, although he is not afraid of legends, it is still very troublesome to locate a special magic item across such a long distance and such a long time. This one has always been in Nevis and has not moved anywhere. Half a year later, and a long time later, it has indeed not moved. This one. This one. This one. Hey, this one left Nevis. Keep up with it. Keep up. Across the ocean, across the continent, and then across the ocean, the geographical distance is nothing to the long river of time, but damn. It was hindered again. This time, it was the interference of a mystery lock that was more powerful than Nevis and a denser legendary force. Damn it! If only I were stronger, if only I were stronger. Gretel stepped back step by step, step by step. Back away 5 meters, back away 10 meters, back away from the scope of the rippling power of time, withdraw from the square used to transform the dragon blood families, simply withdraw from the entire dragon nest. Sains is in a trance. Sains is obsessed. While he is concentrating on trying to use a new way to peer into time, it is best for everyone to go far away to avoid being wrapped up in the rippling power of time. If he is unlucky enough to be killed, not everyone can count on this time dragon to fish people out of the river of time. He stood outside Waska's dragon's lair and watched for half an hour, then an hour. After confirming that the power of time had not rushed out of the dragon's nest and washed away the entire mountain, he flew back to his mage tower with satisfaction and began to work hard. All the living creatures in the dragon's nest that should be evacuated were evacuated. As for dead objects, whether they are gold, silver, or jewelry, they are all things that can withstand the erosion of time, right? Sains, the time dragon, was lying in Waska's dragon's nest, staring at the empty ground in the center of the magic circle. The power of time around him was rippling, and he was breathing heavily, unaware of the passage of time. His eyes penetrated the long river of time, chasing that small point of light, watching it move little by little, penetrating the interference of magic locks and strong magical energy, watching it burst into brilliance, watching the passage of time. The river suddenly stirred up waves. Found it? This is the time. Let me take a closer look, let me look a little more carefully, oh, no. The tense spirit suddenly reached the limit, like a string stretched to the extreme, and suddenly broke with a clang. Time Dragon Sains felt dizzy, lay down on the ground, and closed his eyes tightly. No, it's too forced, it's too forced. Jumping repeatedly through different anchor points to see what you want to see is still too reluctant. Especially in the case of several strong interferences, you must locate accurately, see clearly what is happening, and pick up the pebble you are paying attention to in the long river of time. Am I still too weak? Just after watching the beginning, the scene in front of me was disrupted by powerful energy. Or, should I change the anchor point? Change to an anchor point that is closer to the target I want to see. Jumping only once, compared to jumping twice, always saves more effort and always allows you to see more clearly. He spread his wings and lay flat on the ground, motionless. After lying down for a full day, he staggered out of Waska's dragon's lair and soared into the sky. Go back. Go back to the mage tower. Go back to the young magician and look around to see if there is any anchor point closer to the location he wants to see. The charcoal black, smooth and sharp figure flew into the clouds like a sharp arrow. The next moment, Vasquez, captain of the guard, rushed out from the shelter outside the dragon's nest, plunged into the dragon's nest, and quickly pressed the switches of various defensive magic circles. Call the sky. Call the sky. Master, the uninvited guest has left, all defenses have been activated, no one will come again. Please don't worry. Let's not mention why. Vasca breathed a sigh of relief. Time Dragon Sains returned to the mage tower and told him his needs. Gretel immediately took him into the mage tower without thinking. You want an anchor point, right? Come on, pick one of these microscopes and choose a suitable one for use. After you finish reading, remember to return it and don't break it. Do you need rent? If you predict for us, it will be the rent. Greet smiled calmly. But if it's broken or damaged, you still have to pay for it? Time Dragon Sains nodded and followed Greet to look at each one by one. Every microelectron microscope looks similar, but also has some subtle differences. There is a magician standing guard next to each microscope, staring at him with great vigilance. How long will you borrow it for? We use it every day for experiments. Let Archmage Philby make one by hand at a high speed. It will still take time to make one by hand. From manufacturing, to installation, to debugging, it will take at least a week. Time Dragon Sains followed noncommittally. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he took out a short stick from Gretel's chest pocket with lightning speed. Just this. Just give me this. What a strong power of time, it has followed you and gone through all the important events. Lend it to me, lend me a while. In an instant, several tree roots sprouted from the end of the pencil-shaped oak staff, and then shrank back. In Gretel's consciousness, the oak staff shouted to him through the contract between the two parties. Boss! Boss, what are you doing? Are you going to sell me? To the Time Dragon. Boss, selling me will not do you any good. I will be good. I will work hard. Thanks to Et Quiet, at Lian Oashabae, at book friend 201810081051555322 for the reward of 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1591. The oak staff stretched and was pressed back. Stretched again, pressed back again. From the pencil form, I wanted to be liberated into the normal eyebrow leveling stick form, but was pressed back. From 16 green leaves, trying to stretch out into 16 branches, they were pressed back. From the bare end, a long tree root stretched out to wrap around Gretel's wrist and was pressed back. Obviously, the power of the oak staff is quite, very, completely inadequate in front of the Time Dragon, which is at least a legendary level. Sains didn't need to make any movements, just relying on instinct, he suppressed it quietly, honestly, and properly. There is nothing that can be done except shouting in Gretel's sea of consciousness. Gretel was secretly shocked. The oak staff has been with him for so many years, since he was a nature priest apprentice, and now both nature priest and magician are 16th level. In terms of the nature of energy, he is on par with him. In terms of energy storage capacity, well, maybe he is weaker than him, maybe he is stronger than him. After all, the oak staff takes root in the ground every day, secretly absorbing energy. In the name of storing computing power, Gretel still hasn't counted how many fruits it has produced. Anyway, the oak staff couldn't be opened, and he, Gretel Nordmark, probably wouldn't be able to open it in the hands of time dragon Sains. Being held by him, she was probably lying quietly and very flat. He quickly reached out to grab the oak staff. Wait. I can't give you this. I signed the contract with you. I signed the symbiotic contract with you. I'm here with him, he's with me, I can't give it to you. He stretched out his hand, stretched out his hand, and stretched out his hand again, but still couldn't reach it. Every time it seemed that there was just a little difference, but every time, he clearly felt. Can't reach it, really can't reach it? With just such a small distance, you can feel the temperature on the other person's skin even if your fingertips brush against each other, but you know clearly in your heart that this distance is like a chasm. Is the distance between a level 16 magician and a legend, or in other words, the distance between an ordinary person and a time dragon, that far away? Time dragon Sane stared at the thin, pencil-like oak staff in his hand, reluctant to blink. It's amazing, really amazing. From this small stick, he could clearly see the traces of the flow of time. Day after day, season after season, year after year. When time flows peacefully, you can see the growth rings one by one on it. When time flows forward violently, you can see the waves crashing over you, you can see it rising rapidly, and a green leaf unfolding. Every once in a while, you can even see that around it, sometimes the river of time suddenly turns, which is a sign that the fate of others has been severely affected. Really not bad. Holding it and looking at it is almost the same as looking at it next to the Nordmark mage. Although there is no real-time commentary, you can watch from a farther distance and watch as long as you want. If you want to watch it in the shape of a dragon, just watch it in the shape of a dragon. Hey, 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 Greet grabbed it 3 times, and Sains's palm moved back 3 times. While retreating, he answered absent-mindedly. It's not like I'm not robbing you. It's not like I won't repay you. Lend me to read it for a while, just for a while. I'll return it to you after you finish reading it. Wait, Gretel tried several times in succession to no avail, so he simply jumped in front of Sains and waved his palm vigorously to block his eyes. When the time dragon looked back at him, he said seriously. Ashu is my contract companion staff. He is alive. He has independent wisdom, independent consciousness, thoughts, and emotions. It's not something you can snatch away whenever you want. Just give me some time to convince him and let him cooperate with your observation. If this were an ordinary mortal, Sains would not care. I'm a mortal thing. I'll give you something to look at. Is it to give you face, or for you to make irresponsible remarks? If it interferes with me, just shoot it and fly it away. Shoot it as far away as you can. However, there are 2 strong traces of the splash of the river of time on Gretel. This kind of person deserves a closer look. Sains paused for a moment, pressed the tip of his thumb lightly on the oak cane, and handed it back reluctantly. You persuade him. Well, it's him, not it? Greet breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. Okay, give me some time. Ashu. Ashu. I don't want to go with him. I don't want to go with him, Oakstick continued to cry, make a fuss, cry and make a fuss in his sea of consciousness. In Gretel's meditation world, there even appeared the shadow of an oak tree. The roots of the tree penetrated deeply into the ground, the trunk was thick and straight, at least 30 to 50 meters high, and the crown of the tree blocked the sky and the sun. The leaves rustled and swayed, making a loud rustling sound. The fruits on the branches swayed from east to west, and from west to east, making an arc of more than 180 degrees. After a while, seeing Gretel unmoved, the oak tree shadow suddenly fell down and began to roll on the spot, Roll on the spot, roll on the spot. Gretel. He pressed his temples with a headache. Ashu, you've learned so badly. When did you even learn to roll around? That is to say, there are no rafters in the world of meditation. Otherwise, after crying and making trouble, you would hang yourself 3 times. Roof beams. Where are the rafters? A question quickly came from the sea of consciousness. Gretel sighed, and without stopping, passed on the relevant information about the beam. Select the tallest and straightest tree, cut down the trunk, cut off the trunk and branches, dry and store in the shade for a long time, peel off the bark, chop, peel, plan, shape, carve, and finally, the upper beam. Only a house with beams can be used for hanging. Boss, you don't want me anymore. You don't want me anymore. You're going to cut me off. There's no benefit to you if you cut me off. There's no benefit to you. Oakstaff continued to cry and fuss. Greet switched from rubbing her temples to rubbing her eyebrows, closed her eyes, and tried to persuade him in the sea of consciousness. Don't argue. Don't make trouble. I won't abandon you. You are very important to me, very important. My current idea is that you spend some time every day to be observed by the time dragon. At the same time, get some benefits from him. What's the benefit? The trunk of the oak cane that had fallen to the ground lifted up with a brush and stood straight. Greet said slowly. For example, feel the flow of time. Haven't you always wanted to grow up? Want to grow up quickly? The power of time will be of great help to you. Another example is the land that has been affected by the time dragon, and the water veins that have been infiltrated. You can stretch out the roots and try to absorb it, and I think he won't mind. For another example, you can try to understand the magic related to time and record and imprint it in your fruits. Various prophecies, time stopping, etc. are all essentially the manipulation of time. Who else is better at this than the time dragon? It sounds reasonable. Gretel, in turn, bargained with Sains. Presenting facts, reasoning, and stating the work of Oakrod around him and its importance to him, he discussed it for a long time and finally decided on the cooperation plan. First of all, Ashu usually needs to help me calculate a lot of research results and control a lot of magic circles, so he can't be taken away by you during the day. He must be by my side every day during my working hours. But Sains frowned slightly. Gretel quickly picked up. But the essence of your observation of him is to observe the fluctuations of time, isn't it? He can only trigger the fluctuations of time when he is by my side and helping me work. Take him away, and your observations will be inaccurate. That's not bad. Sains thought for a moment and acquiesced, then what? Then, Ashu is not being observed by you for nothing. You must give him some benefit. When you observe him, let him be planted in the soil like a tree, spread out its branches and leaves, feel your power, and absorb the things around you. Is soil and water okay? No problem. Sains readily agreed. When I was observing it, I also had to unfold the dragon's body. It's so small that it's not convenient for me to hold it in my hand. I must let it plant it, get some sun and moon, drink some water and eat some soil. Yes, whatever. Even if it is the power of time that I swallow, as long as it can eat it, I can eat it as much as I want. Of course, basically all things do not have this talent and cannot eat it. That is their own problem. Finally, I know that you are observing him to observe the time fluctuations in me. However, I am not being observed by you in vain. I also have my privacy, right? Then what do you want? Time Dragon raised an eyebrow slightly. What, do you want my treasure? That's impossible. Neither is possible. Even a gold coin, a silver cup, and a long sword inlaid with gems, I have worked hard to save them and throw them into the river of time to let them soak. It's absolutely impossible for me to give it to you. Ah, I don't want gold or silver coins, and I don't want treasures either, don't worry, Greet reassured him before speaking. By the way, how many time spells do you know? Retrospective vision? Time stop? Eternal stasis? He tentatively said a few spells, and Time Dragon Sains looked calm. What's so difficult about this? I can do it. If you know how to do it, can you write a few scrolls for me? Gretel immediately picked up a lot of high-level monster skins on his snake-killing stick. Read it for 1 day and write 1 scroll, read it for 2 days and write 2 scrolls. Isn't that difficult for you? It's just a matter of using the tips of your paws, right? That won't work, Sains immediately exploded. No, exploded his scales. How can it be so easy to write a magic scroll? It also requires materials. It requires magic crystal powder and ink made from various magic materials. How can it be so easy? Do I have to pay for these things myself? No way. I'll let them out. Get the mage tower ready. A magic scroll, prepare 2, no, 3 copies of the materials. Thanks to @Onini1206 for the 200 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1592. 3 materials. Time Dragon Sains' eyes flashed. There is no material that can be used to make spell scrolls, especially high-level spell scrolls, that is not a treasure. Either energy-rich magic crystals, high-grade gems, or materials from various high-level magic beasts and high-level magic plants. The main product is valuable, very valuable, priceless but not marketable. Can be him. 3 servings are not enough. I want 5 servings. 5 servings is a bit too much. Gretel frowned and pondered, already feeling happy. 5 materials can be exchanged for a 5-ring or 6-ring magic scroll, which can only be done with a favor. Copying scrolls also has a success rate. A skilled level 9 mage can copy 5-ring spells that he can skillfully cast, and has a success rate of 1/3, which is almost laughable. Magicians don't cast spells in vain. The extra materials should be treated as rewards and put in their own pockets. Otherwise, who will do the work for you? As for the 5 materials, if you want to redeem a 9-ring spell scroll, it can basically be regarded as a dream. Not to mention that the success rate of making a 9-ring spell scroll has dropped to less than 10%. Just ask, who can I copy? Level 17 archmages are all sprinting towards the legendary realm. Apart from using them for their own use, protecting their descendants, and exchanging essential resources, they basically don't do such hard work. Except for a high-level mage who is nearing his end of life and has no hope of becoming a legend, who can survive by copying 9-ring spell scrolls and selling them for money. But there is no need to tell Sains these words. The left and right time dragons copy the scrolls of certain time-based spells, which is basically a stroke of their claws, and the success rate is approximately 100%. 1 piece of material is used and 4 pieces of material are used as tribute. Isn't that enough? It's not just a transaction of exchanging materials for scrolls. The main thing here is that he is selling his privacy. You know, these high-end materials are usually very rare. Moreover, if they are used to make scrolls, a series of processing is required, and the success rate of processing is also limited. 5 parts of materials can produce 3 parts of scroll ink, which means the processor is very skilled. No need for them to process it. Just give me the materials, Time Dragon Sains replied matter-of-factly. Processing, who wants them to process it? What does he need the scroll ink for? What he wants is materials. The material itself. Those shiny, sparkling, precious, magical things. That. Greet frowned and hesitated. Sains lowered his face and reached for the oak staff. That's it? 5 materials every day, in exchange for 1 scroll. Go ahead and work. Give me the oak stick when you finish it. Hurry, hurry. Gretel. Unexpectedly, as the project leader, I would have to be urged to work one day. The teacher doesn't push me to work, my senior brother doesn't push me to work, my senior sister doesn't push me to work, and even the Dragon Clan, who is the investor of the project, doesn't push me to work. Instead, His Excellency Time Dragon follows suit and sticks behind his back, urging me to work. Okay. I'll go to work right away. Try to finish it before 8 o'clock in the evening, and then give you the oak cane. By the way, the oak cane must be returned to me before 8 o'clock every morning. It's a deal. Snap, a soft sound, palms hitting each other. Greed took back his hand, and there was already a small hourglass-shaped mark on his palm, which was regarded as a contract between the two parties. Gretel took a long breath and went back to work. Up and down the mage tower, all research progress must be sorted out and pushed hard. On the necromancer's side, the work of injecting dragon souls into dragon beast eggs needs to be further adjusted. Last time, normal dragon eggs were used as the injection objects. This time, the dragon eggs had to be processed. Watch them set up Experimental Group 1, Experimental Group 2, Experimental Group 3. There won't be a control group. Dragon souls are so rare, even dragon soul fragments are very rare. On the nature priest side, we must hurry up on the various transformations of dragon eggs, sub-dragons, pseudo-dragons, and lizard eggs, as well as the targeted enhancement of chromosomes. It is necessary to test the functions of various dragon chromosome points on dragon eggs and various monster eggs to the maximum extent, and test the acceptance limit of the transformed people. It seems that lizards have the fewest insertion points, pseudo-dragons have more, and sub-dragons have more. The stronger the creature, the more modifications it can accept. There seems to be a pattern here. Let's try to summarize it. And crucially, what is the nature of these chromosomes that attract and control extraordinary power? Before, he had only observed that these chromosome points would flash with golden light when they controlled extraordinary power. But why did they emit golden light? Was it the transition of electrons, or some other principle? One research project after another, one puzzle after another, all required him to experiment, observe, and influence others, such as senior sister's experiments. There are only 24 hours in a human day. Every day, you should sleep for 8 hours, meditate for 2 hours, and learn magic for 2 hours. This removes 12 hours. Oh, why are you wasting so much time? It would be great if I could only sleep 4 hours a day. It is said that the elves can only sleep 4 hours a day. Why can't I? Greed sighed painfully. He has tried hard to squeeze his meal time into work. When he is in a meeting or observing less dangerous research, he will try his best to squeeze in a few sandwiches in 3 bites. Or you can transform into a silver dragon and eat as much as you can while practicing the transformation technique. One meal can keep you from being hungry for more than 10 days, and you only need to drink some water during the day. However, you don't have to eat food, but you can't stop reading books. The more research work he participates in, the more knowledge he needs to supplement. Just related to the research direction of the necromancer, there are countless reference books and reference papers waiting for him to read. Sanes, the time dragon, also made a similar sigh but in the opposite direction. Why does this Nordmark mage work so hard? It would be great if he could rest more every day. Wouldn't it be better to rest more, chat with the silver dragon girl more, and enjoy life more? Even if it means meditating more and reading more books, it would be good. He is only level 16 and will soon be level 17. He is advancing so quickly. Why don't he learn so many 8-ring magic? Don't you want to learn so many 9-ring magic? He must concentrate on his research and hold on to his oak staff. However, only when this mage is working or conducting research, the river of time in his body will suddenly jump and splash beautiful water. The result of pulling and adjusting was that Gretel worked 12 hours a day and slept, studied, and meditated 12 hours a day. Sains took away the oak stick at 8 p.m. every night and returned it at 8 a.m., exactly. Oh, it's so troublesome. Sains took the oak staff from Gretel's hand, turned around and left. Gretel heard the oak stick chattering in the sea of consciousness. Master, tell him, find a good place for me, a good place. Just tell him. Hey, Gretel quickly chased after him and shouted. Find him a hillside, a place with deep soil and a nearby water source. Don't look for mountain tops or cliffs. Last night you put him on the top of the mountain, there was a thick layer of ice and snow, and the roots of the trees were full of rocks. He complained to me for a whole day. Got it. Sains tightened his grip on the oak staff and walked faster and faster. After a few steps, he jumped into the air, spread out a pair of dragon wings, and shot away. This oak staff is so annoying, it's just a tree, just give it a place to stand, and you have to pick and choose. Your master has no time to take you all over the world, to all the mountains and rivers. After arriving at Dragon Island for such a long time, he was stuck in the mage tower and couldn't move. I take you to the top of the mountain, take you to the cliff, take you to all kinds of terrain that you can't usually reach, and you still dislike me. He found a wide valley at random, pierced the oak stick into the opposite hillside, lay down and squinted his eyes. Time rolled back, and the oak staff that expanded to a height of 30 meters shrank into an eyebrow-level stick in his eyes, and then shrank back into the shape of a seed. Then, the seed swayed on the branches, swayed, fell from the treetops, and was held in the hands of a young man. Then, it was wrapped in a ball of mistletoe and planted into the soil. Well, I can see it more clearly this time, although this section is nothing special, and there is no violent turmoil in the river of time, but following this anchor point and observing the people next to him, it is indeed much easier. Sure enough, we still have to practice. We have to practice. We have to practice more. He lay down in the valley and stared at the oak stick carefully, looking at it point by point along the path it had taken in time. From the moment when an oak seed is planted and grows into an oak staff, locate that place and then observe that small city. Watching the slow flow of time, observing the moment when the ripples of time suddenly set off, seeing the plague, and then locating the microscope that played a key role. Then from this microscope, locate its brothers and sisters, locate the various things they see. My eyes are so tired. Time Dragon Sains closed his eyes again. Most of the time ripples on the microscope are subtle, very subtle, so subtle that they are almost invisible. So out of boredom, he began to try to observe the things he saw through the microscope. Dying failed. Dying failed again. Dying failed again. This bacterial culture failed, the petri dish is full of miscellaneous bacteria. Oh. I raised it this time. There were constant mutterings, which were annoying, depressing, and sometimes exciting, reaching his ears across the river of time. Sains closed his eyes for a while and tried hard to observe again. He found that looking at those extremely tiny things through the river of time and through the microscope was a very big challenge for himself. The ability to squeeze him is particularly powerful. Work harder. Be sure to see it clearly today. Thank you for the 500 starting coins rewarded by travelers who fight for their dreams. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1593. Time Dragon Sains wanders around the Mage Tower every day during the day, observing Gretel and making prophecies for the eggs at Gretel's request. In the evening, collect 5 magic materials, hand in a scroll, hold Gretel's oak staff and watch hard, watch hard, watch hard. With a goal, motivation, and a target for training, Sains only feels that his strength is growing by leaps and bounds. At the beginning, You could only jump 3 times, each time lasting just over an hour. After practicing in the past few days, if it is an unimportant anchor point or an item that does not cause big waves, I can jump 4 times and persist for an hour and a half. Sure enough, you still need to practice. Only by having a goal that is interesting enough can it attract him to keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing. He squatted near the mage tower and watched mesmerizedly. He practiced so much that he forgot all about food and sleep. He was quiet and happy with the magicians. However, the legendary dragons in Sky Dragon City who knew that he had come to the mage tower could not be so relieved. "How's Sains doing lately?" "I don't know, there was no news from below. When the process was sent to us for approval, they didn't mention what Sains did. At least, there was no conflict with the mage tower. Is it possible that in front of a time dragon, a legendary time dragon, these messages cannot be sent out at all?" Steel Dragon Bastos was worried. "Even we can't beat him, or in other words, we can't beat him or get close to him. Those little guys below are not even legends. Why don't Sains just do whatever he wants?" "Well, that's not it." Elder Batista raised his head, flicked his tail, and a stream of light flashed across his silver scales. "When I took him there, he and little Gretel got along very well, and he was also very interested in little Greet. With his temperament, he shouldn't be messing around, right? Who knows? And to be honest, even if the time dragon is interested in getting along with him, even if he is well intentioned, most people may not be able to withstand it." Hiss. The more Elder Batista thought about it, the more he became uneasy. The noise around him was high and low, and it was all comments from his companions, and no one was optimistic about the fact that Sains would not cause trouble. Although almost none of these guys who made comments have actually dealt with the time dragon, they basically relied on the stereotypes passed down by word of mouth and the inexplicable things in the dragon's legacy. To be honest, they are not very accurate. However, Elder Batista thought about his experience in dealing with Sains and knew that this guy is more reliable, mainly because the time dragon is relatively withdrawn and will try to stay away from the crowd and is not very likely to cause trouble. Something big is coming. However, if it is not reliable, it is really unreliable. Even if it is the elder himself, if he gets close to him, the power of time will suddenly burst out if he is not safe. 1 or 2 dragon scales were lost, a small nail was broken off, and the tip of the tail was covered with a layer of dust. This kind of accident does not happen every time, but it does happen from time to time. And that was him, the legendary silver dragon, with strong strength, quick reactions, and strong healing power of his own. The human magicians below were rolled into ashes by the power of time, and they might not even be able to scream. "No, he has to go and see." Elder Batista stood up and walked around to make sure that there was no backlog of seriously injured patients and that the young healers could handle it. He was also sure that the fighting above was not too intense and there would be no compatriots who needed to be rescued for the time being. Then, he told the little guys to work hard, spread his wings, and flew down to Dragon City in the sky. Penetrate the clouds and mist, push away the air, and fly all the way down. Not long after, in the darkness, the light on the top of the mage tower appeared. "Well, here we are. So where is Sains?" "In the tower, or somewhere nearby." Elder Batista stretched out his wings, suspended in the air, and looked around. In addition to natural light, the dragon's eyes can also see the fluctuations of magic power. On the vast land, the mage tower is like a torch, condensing powerful magic power. A mile or 2 away from the mage tower, there is also a group of energy sources, which are much weaker than the mage tower, but they are still eye-catching on the ground. And there's. Found it? Elder Batista rolled up the clouds and shot arrows down. Soon, he saw the motionless time dragon lying in front of an oak tree on the edge of a riverbank covered with ice and snow. Hey, how are you doing lately? Are you getting along well with them? What have you learned? Hey, is this the accompanying oak staff of Little Greed? Why did you bring it? Couldn't you have robbed it? Sains turned a deaf ear and remained motionless. If it weren't for the colorful rolling scrolls on his body, which showed that he was savoring the changes of time, Elder Batista would have almost thought that this time dragon had died. The river of time was too dangerous at that time, and Elder Batista did not dare to get close. He could only walk around to the opposite side of him and stare at the oak staff. Well, the oak staff, or rather, the oak tree with its crown spread out, looks like it's doing well. The trunk is tall and straight, the branches and leaves are thick and smooth, and the crystal clear fruits on the branches are constantly rotating. Inside the fruits, magic runes are floating and sinking. On the branch closest to the time dragon, a small, finger-sized green fruit is growing. On the surface of the fruit, there seems to be a slight, extremely thin power of time flowing. Looking more closely, the power of time is so thin that it is almost invisible, flowing from the soil, flowing water and air to the thin tree roots and then to the main root. From the stretched green leaves, to the thin branches, and then to the 16 thickest branches. Finally, it blends up and down in the trunk, brews, condenses, and is transported into the fruit to be recorded. Well, it looks like the little guy is doing well. Elder Batista calmed down a little, lay down opposite the oak staff, and looked at the time dragon carefully. About an hour later, the spinning power of time finally calmed down in Sains's eyes. He raised his head, and the look of Elder Silver Dragon reflected in his eyes. Ah, hey, when did you come? Ah, you've been here for a while, what are you doing here? Oh, let's see how you get along with the people here, Elder Batista replied matter-of-factly. While answering, he looked at the other person. How have you been lately? Didn't you get into any trouble? Didn't you pull someone into the river of time and be unable to pull him out? By the way, how did you get this oak stick? You couldn't have robbed little Gretel, right? Who said that? How could I get into trouble? Time Dragon Sains was a little annoyed and a little guilty. Well, there is no pulling people into the river of time, but there are still a few times where things are destroyed. There have been several occasions when the entire Mage Tower has been alerted and the entire Mage Tower has been evacuated. No, I can't talk to him anymore. He needs to get out of here. Time Dragon Sains narrowed his eyes and stared at Elder Batista closely. Push forward, push a little further. We have located Sky Dragon City. Very good. Let's take a quick look at what will happen next in Sky Dragon City. Well, it's a bit tiring to observe the river of time like this, especially when every anchor point is a legend, or an existence with a power similar to that of a legend. If he hadn't been practicing for a while recently, he probably wouldn't even be able to see clearly. Locate the meeting hall and move it a little. If you push one legendary dragon back one day, nothing will happen. If you push another legendary dragon one day back, nothing will happen. Another legendary dragon. Huh. I suggest you go back quickly. Sains yawned, fell to the ground, and slowly closed his eyes. He only threw his long and thin tail forward, and the two forked tail tips swayed, and one of them adjusted its direction and pointed towards the sky. Hurry back to Sky Dragon City, then go to the top of the meeting hall, and head to the northeast. Hurry up and rush to a place close to the world barrier. Otherwise, some of our compatriots will die. Elder Batista was startled, and a gust of cold air penetrated from the dragon horns above his head to the end of the dragon's tail. His whole body shivered, and the dragon scales all over his body stood up and then fell flat. Sains rarely says this. No, it should be, he never cares about such noisy things. Who is with whom, who is fighting with whom, who is dying, who has laid a few eggs and hatched a few baby dragons. He never cared. It's rare that he actually speaks for once. but it is better to believe that this kind of thing exists than to believe that it does not exist. The elder didn't have time to say anything. He spread his wings and a strong wind swept him, pushing him into the sky like a sharp arrow. The cold wind beneath our feet was so strong that the broken ice and snow on the river beach flew up quickly and hit the oak tree head on. Even the outstretched leaves of the oak tree were torn off by the strong wind. Hey! 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 The oak staff shook desperately and yelled. Why are you torturing me? I didn't offend you. Late. Elder Batista sprinted upward with all his strength, 10 times faster than when he was flying with Gretel and Sarala. There was an explosion in the air, and the white clouds spread out in a ring. In a moment, the light pillar of Dragon City in the sky enveloped the elder, pulling him across the boundary between Dragon City and the sky. The elder rushed into the sky Dragon City without slowing down and continued to sprint in the direction pointed by the time dragon. Rising 500 meters, it was quiet and quiet overhead. Rising 1 kilometer, I saw the flying and patrolling figure of a giant dragon in the distance. Further up, up again, and up again, the world barrier at the zenith suddenly tore open a shocking black crack. Elder Batista. He was really right? No, he really accurately predicted that something would happen here. He rushed forward as hard as he could, and when he was still 1 kilometer away from the crack, he saw a huge red dragon rolling down from the crack. While falling, blood spilled into the sky. One side of the dragon's wings had disappeared, and a huge gash was opened on its body, tearing from the dragon's neck to its lower abdomen. Elder Batista hurriedly came up to him and spread his healing skills for free. Angzi. Angzi, hold on. Fortunately, okay, if he hadn't come here, Angzi would have died. Speaking of which, is Time Dragon Sanes very capable? Did he actually succeed in predicting him? Are you thinking of a way to get him to do more work for Dragon City? A book written by a group of authors, I can digitize the Yuling. Introduction, the Red Moon is high and monsters are rampant. Human beings use the power of spirit to defend the territory and build a sanctuary outside the demonic tide to become the last pure land of mankind. This is a world of spiritual control with extraordinary power. Everything has spirituality, and the spiritual master can control all the spirits in the world. Elves, beasts, spiritual tools, undead, and even gods. Programmer Chen Guangming traveled through time, awakened the special talent of spiritual programming, and gained the power to edit all things with spiritual codes. From then on, a spirit that only existed in fantasy was created, a dragon of order with the power to master data and transcend the ordinary, a lord of chaos with a good will, opening the beginning and the end, and a power to devour all things. The eternal shadow of the abyss. Burn yourself and change the world, this is the ultimate destiny of programmers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1594. Stop the bleeding. Cover the bleeding point. Push back the guts. Mend the guts. Align the bones so they can grow back and connect properly. Healing the wounds layer by layer, while raising the mental induction to the strongest, paying close attention to the situation of the red dragon Angzi. I'm still breathing, which is pretty good, my heart is beating vigorously, which is good, the magic power flowing in my body is a little stagnant, with wisps around the edges, and the flow direction is disordered. Oops, I was beaten hard this time. No matter what, my life was saved. Elder Batista spread out his mental power to call out the strong wind, forming a soft and dense mat, and slowly lowered Angzi, the red dragon. Then, he called for more fire power, causing Angzi to breathe heavily and replenish the somewhat depleted power in his body. This is how the dragon clan is. As long as they have enough strength, they can recover very quickly. Whether it's muscles, bones, scales, or blood. The blood of dragons is a little different from the blood of ordinary creatures. All blood flowing from the dragon's heart passes through a gland called the basal vasculature before traveling to the body. This gland is the center of elemental activity in the dragon's body. It converts various foods digested by the dragon into useful energy and injects it into the dragon's body for the dragon to fly, fight and attack. At the same time, it can also be transformed in reverse, such as stimulating muscle growth, bone growth, scale growth, and blood filling. The energy is endless and the dragon is immortal. Elder Batista once carefully read Gretel's paper on hematopoietic magic, and wanted to develop hematopoietic magic suitable for dragons. The result of the research is that as long as there are basal blood vessels and enough energy, everything will be easy. The dragon's body is like that of a lower race that cannot control itself. When it senses a lack of blood, it will generate blood on its own without the need for extra magical influence. Elder Batista was busy up and down, up and down. The legendary dragon's body was huge and he was seriously injured. He threw a lot of healing magic to repair the broken body of the red dragon Angzi. While cleaning up, he also called on various powers to make up for the cracks in the world's barrier and block the black wind overflowing from those cracks. Break them up, and lift them up into the barrier of the world, allowing the barrier to wipe out the invading power on its own. Even if it can't be wiped out, it still has to give other legendary dragons time to react. Well, very good, the following has been alerted, and reinforcements are coming. Elder Batista passed by them, holding up the red dragon Angzi, and slowly descended. When it dropped to the level of the central flower-shaped meeting hall, 5 or 6 legendary dragons had already flown up to greet them. Oh, this hurts really badly. Fortunately, you are here, otherwise Angzi's life would be over. With such a serious injury, he probably won't be able to fly back to the dragon tomb. Tisk tisk, there is no way for the legendary dragon to return to the dragon tomb. I'm afraid the only option is to send it to the mage tower immediately. Tisk, if you take in the dragon soul now and wait for it to be stuffed into a dragon egg, there is still a chance that you can become a dragon again in the future. The dragon soul of the legendary dragon? They haven't reached this step yet, have they? Depending on the progress of the research, by the time the legendary dragon can be used, it may be possible to stuff dragon eggs instead of using dragon beast eggs. The red dragon Angzi lay dying on the clouds, his chest rising and falling slightly. Hearing the comments around him becoming more and more unseemly, he could only roll his eyelids and snort a ball of sparks from his nostrils. Elder Batista felt sorry for him and threw a few pieces of red ore fished out of the magma to his mouth. Angzi rolled his tongue, ate with a click, and hummed feebly. Thank you. By the way, why did you end up like this? Fortunately, the elder flew up, otherwise, your life would be over. Don't mention it, I went out of the barrier to patrol around, and suddenly a particularly large space crack opened beside me, and then black wind blew out. I blasted with all my strength for a while, flattening the thing, but it still tore it apart. A lot of holes were opened, ahem. By the way, Elder, why did you remember to go up? Aren't you on vacation today? It's really magical to say the least. I went down to look for the time dragon Saints today. Elder Batista is also really scared. There are, to say the least, dozens of legendary dragons in Sky Dragon City. They are already the largest force in the world. In terms of number alone, they exceed that of the Glory Holy See. Not much to say, so far, the largest number is only in 2 digits, and there is still a very, very long way to go before 3 digits. Moreover, if any major human force dies, a new one will surely be replaced within a few decades or 100 years. Dragon Clan? The death of a legend in the Dragon Clan takes decades and 100 years, which is just enough for the young dragon to grow up to adulthood. It is still far, far away from becoming a legend. As he spoke, the dragons around him sighed, and their hissing sounds came one after another. Up to now, the large-scale battle has not yet started, but everyone is already feeling the pressure. Some are slightly injured, some are lying down due to exhaustion, and some want to sleep for several months after a round of patrols, one after another. If that small world came to press on top of their heads, and all the fighting forces tried their best to push it up, how many of the same people would die? How many of the same people have to be hurt? Even today, Red Dragon Angzi almost died if he was not careful. If there is time for the Light Dragon to give guidance on when a war will break out, everyone needs to raise their vigilance to the highest level. When is it safer for everyone to take a break? When is life in danger, which type of defensive equipment is best to bring, or which type of offensive magic equipment is best, or it is best for a healer to stay nearby and provide support at any time. With such guidance, everyone's probability of casualties can be reduced by at least half, right? How did you get him to speak? Emerald Dragon Tana couldn't help but stretched her neck forward. I tried to find him before and asked him if my daughter's child could be hatched successfully and how many baby dragons would awaken their true names, but he ignored me. I tried my best to give him gifts and brought a lot of gems with me. I gave it to him and he ignored me. First, the concept of treasure for time dragons is not necessarily the same as that of ordinary dragons. Second, how many gems you mentioned are there? It's not as big as your hands can hold in your human form, right? Elder Batista tried hard not to complain. He thought about it carefully. I don't know, when I went there, he happened to be lying on the ground, staring at the little guy Gretel's staff. He looked hard and tried hard, but he didn't notice that I was coming. Maybe he thought I was annoying, so he looked for me. A topic to dismiss me with. So what is he looking at? Steel Dragon Bastos asked curiously. In other words, if we often disturb him and interrupt his observation, he will get annoyed and point at us. When will his life be in danger? Maybe it's a good idea. Yes, what a good idea. Before we go to war in the future, let's go find him first. Good idea. Anyway, if he watches a few at a time, it won't be a big waste for him. The legendary dragons were talking a lot. Elder Batista was sweating profusely after hearing this, and quickly stopped. Don't be in a hurry to use this method. I'll go find out more. What if there is a better way? What if there is a way with a higher success rate? That guy Sains doesn't like to deal with the mundane things in his mouth. What if everyone flew down in a large group, annoyed that guy, turned around and flew back to his dragon's nest, delaying the scientific research progress of greed? Wouldn't he still have to run errands to invite her? What a joke. He threatened, suppressed, and showed his majesty as the first healer. It took him a long time to suppress the dragon's eagerness to move. Then, he sent Red Dragon Angzi to recuperate, and returned again. Huh? Where did that Sains guy go? It was daybreak, work was done, and the oak staff was handed back. That guy Sains followed Greet step by step, trying his best to stare at him with wide eyes, watching his every move, watching the ripples of time around him. Elder Batista searched up and down for a long time, and finally found His Excellency Time Dragon on the 12th floor of the Mage Tower. Archmage Philby is operating the chromosome strips under the microscope, carefully applying electricity inside, and at the same time opening up the small world to carefully observe the changes in the chromosomes. Greet stood behind her, staring closely at the instrument next to her, not missing any change in the instrument's reading. And Time Dragon Sains's eyes were fixed on the back of Greet's head, not relaxing at all. How about it? There is still no change. Archmage Philby shook her head in frustration. I have tried all kinds of currents, various intensities and various voltages, infrared rays, ultraviolet rays, all kinds of light, all kinds of electromagnetic waves, all kinds of existing rays, I have tried them all. But to no avail. There is no change in those golden dots. They only respond to magic power, and they only change when extraordinary power flows, and the nature of these changes is completely invisible. Don't be in a hurry, take your time. Gretel tried to comfort her. Researching a new field is always troublesome, and it is not easy to produce results. We still have a lot of time, but if we can't do it, we can do it all over again when you step into the legend and your observation skills improve. No need behind them, Time Dragon Sane suddenly said. Greet turned around suddenly and looked at him eagerly. You mean, before the legend, there was hope of success? What is the method? Can you give me some direction? Sanes closed his lips tightly and stopped talking again. Seeing this situation, Elder Batista quickly strode in. Signs, I have something to ask you. Thank you for your prediction today. Angzi successfully escaped from danger. For the benefit of the Dragon Clan, can you please do me a favor and make a prediction for everyone every week or every month? No way. Sanes turned his head hard. Before he could refuse, Greet quickly spoke. Well, if the Dragon Clan loses, we will be in a lot of trouble here. Besides, don't you want to exercise your abilities? Making prophecies often is not the same as looking at it with an oak staff, isn't it? Thanks for watching it and looking at the 100 starting coins for the reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1595. I'm tired of looking at the future. You watch it every day anyway, so it doesn't matter if you watch it more. But watching Legend is very tiring. Sanes, the Time Dragon, has a face with no gaps at all. The smoothness can match that of steel plates, and there are no wrinkles at all. I do not want to look. You should try it once in a while. Gretel also joined in the persuasion. Aren't you tired of looking at the oak staff every day? If you look at the oak staff every day, you will see legends from time to time. Now that you have seen them all, wouldn't it be nice to look at the dragon legends to change your eyes and mood? I don't want to. Sanes's face became more and more indifferent, and he turned his head towards the window again. Before his eyes could shine, Greet quickly turned to him, stood on tiptoes and pointed them into his eyes. Don't you want to improve your strength? Don't you want to watch more? Haven't you always told me that watching 12 hours a day is not enough for you and will not serve as a workout? Then let's look at the Dragon Clan again. Wouldn't it be nice to look at your fellow tribesmen, help them, and put some pressure on you to exercise? Sanes turned his head again, but did not speak to refute. Elder Batista immediately followed suit and beat the drum. Yes, yes, it can not only increase strength, but also help the same clan. Isn't it great? To be honest, if the Dragon Clan really suffers heavy casualties, declines, and gives up the number 1 position in the world, it will not do anything to you. What a benefit! The number 1 position in the world has been given up a long time ago, Shijuan Long said coldly. Without waiting for the elder to refute, he added 2 more words, which fell to the ground like ice and snow. Humanity. Yes, humans. With their huge population size, strong reproductive capacity, creativity, research capabilities, and various abilities, humans have occupied the most resource-rich continent in the world, driving other races to the corners. On those continents, legends about dragons, giant dragons, and evil dragons are widely circulated. In the past, it was the paradise of their dragon clan. But now, whether it's because I dislike being too noisy, or because I hate the waves of so-called brave men who come to take risks, or because they are squeezed out of the living space by humans. In short, the elves traveled across the ocean, the dragons moved to Dragon Island, the dwarves ran to the mountains of the Black Gate Peninsula, and the orcs were driven far into the desert. Human beings, and only human beings, occupy the most suitable soil for survival in this world. Gretel turned his head silently, not wanting to speak. Archmage Philby even breathed softly, fearing that her presence would be too strong, and if she was not careful, she would be disliked by some dragon, and that would cause trouble. Elder Batista was stunned for a moment. Then the old man stroked his beard and let out a long sigh. Yes, yes. So we can't suffer any more losses. At least, we can't suffer too big losses anymore. Sains, since you understand this, can you help us? Sains remained sullen and silent. After a while, he whispered. If I interfere in the future, I will suffer backlash. The more I interfere, the more backlash I will suffer. But you helped us predict. Greet was surprised. Sains glanced at him. What does that mean to you? A dragon beast, a lizard, even a baby dragon, so what? Take a look at it and tell it, you won't stop raising it properly because of this, and just let him die. Those insignificant things, even if they are predicted 1,000 or 10,000 times, as long as Greet and the others raise these little guys well and raise them to the point in time he sees, they will not disturb the river of time. Huh, as a time dragon, he doesn't even have the ability to cheat at this point. How could he survive until now? But legend is different. Changing the fate of legend is too much of a burden for me. He answered decisively. As he spoke, he took a dozen steps forward, jumped up, and left the mage tower. Gretel and Elder Batista followed closely behind. They followed the time dragon and flew several kilometers away. They found a flat river beach and spread out the dragon's body, showing them the traces on their bodies. You see, observing the fate of a lizard and simply speaking about it will only add such a small scratch on my scales. If you don't pay attention, you can't see it at all. Telling the fate of a dragon beast, even if it is the first dragon beast that is injected with dragon soul, gains wisdom and becomes a real dragon, it will only make my scales, just a dragon scale, be beaten by the river of time and become mottled and old. But changing the fate of the legendary dragon. He turned around and raised the left dragon wing high, revealing a huge piece under the dragon wing, about 1 square meter in size. There, the charcoal black dragon scales turned white, curled, became brittle, and had many cracks. Forcibly changing his fate, the twisted river of time will hit me directly. It hurts, very painful. Not only will it hurt my scales, but it will also cause pain in my chest, tightness, breathlessness, and bones that feel like I need to fold it a bit. Elder Batista was speechless for a moment. Greet was beside him and asked in a low voice. How so? Because the river of time is not something that can be disturbed so easily. Elder Batista was a little embarrassed, glanced at the time dragon quickly, and quickly found a topic to interrupt. The river of time is like the river in front of us. We are all fish swimming in it. Fish cannot see clearly the current in front of them when they are in the water, unless there is a reef in front of them, which is very close. Close, or jump, right. Greet had an idea flash in her mind and quickly responded. Elder Batista nodded. Yes, jump up. A prophet with weak talent can jump lower, and the distance of the water that can be seen in front of him is relatively close. Of course, after jumping into the water, the impact will be smaller. But a prophet with strong talent can jump very high and see far away, but he will be hit harder. This is why the lifespan of a prophet is not very long. Greet followed his words. Interface. Moreover, if there are rocks and relatively large waves ahead, that is to say, if something particularly big happens, you can still see it at a glance even if you don't jump very high. That's right. Elder Batista nodded in approval. Due to its special talent, the time dragon can fly out of the river of time very smoothly. If you look at it from a distance, then dive into the water, it will hardly be impacted. He glanced sideways at the time dragon. Sains has lowered his wings to cover the large injury at the root of the dragon's wings. But those mottled, broken, curled, and white dragon scales were still burning and stubbornly stayed in his field of vision. But, force it to change its course, or even just make a small tributary change its course. That can't happen without paying a price. Moreover, changing the name of the legendary dragon will cost a considerable price. Greet also fell silent. Although in his opinion, if he had to change his fate once and pay only 1 square meter of dragon scales, the Time Dragon Lord could carry it at least hundreds of times, but he could not be generous to others. After a long silence, Gretel walked towards Sains in small steps and asked in a low voice. Then, is there any other way? For example, using spells, magic circles, or various methods to help you share part of the backlash. Or if the healing spell can cure it, we can try to treat it as much as possible. Or, it's not like there's nothing. Sains had a cold face and didn't want to answer at first, but when he saw Greet tilting his head and tiptoes, trying to look up at him, he replied lightly. In fact, if something like backlash is relatively light, it is not impossible to handle it. Carrying it through is also a kind of exercise for yourself. However, there is no benefit, and there is not enough benefit, so why should he carry it? Why carry it for irrelevant mortal things? After this time, there will be another one. The Dragon Clan's war will last for many, many years. During this long time, the Dragon Clan has been bothering him, begging him for prophecies, and disturbing him until he has no peace. What is he planning? Picture what? The Time Dragon is not that kind of mortal thing. As long as the Time Dragon spends its years normally, even if it does nothing but just lies in the dragon's nest and watches the flow of time every day, it can become a legend and a being comparable to the gods. Of course, there are benefits, and it doesn't mean that we can't help them, but the premise is not to let him bargain by himself, it will be too tiring and too embarrassing. He replied, closed his eyes again, and lay down lazily. Gretel suddenly brightened up. As long as there is a way. Elder, whatever conditions are needed, we will provide them and try to reduce the backlash. Elder Batista was also very moved. He took 2 quick steps and rushed to the Time Dragon. After thinking about it, he also unfolded the silver dragon form and lay down face to face with the Time Dragon. So, old friend, old buddy, help us. You make an order for the magic circle, magic equipment, and various materials needed to reduce the backlash, and I'll let them prepare it. The dragons who want to find your prophecy should come to you with their own materials and magic equipment. Every time you make a prediction, prepare at least 3 times the amount of materials, no, 5 times. Is 5 times okay? Sains closed his eyes and said nothing. Gretel looked left and right, but he could only bravely float up a few meters, stood between the 2 giant dragons, and acted as the mouthpiece of the Time Dragon. How much backlash can be reduced by using a magic circle constructed with the best materials and equipment? Is 90% enough? 80%? 70%? 50%? It can't only be reduced by 1/3, right? The magic circle used by human prophets can at least reduce the backlash by half. Elder Batista was well informed and quickly gave the answer. If you find someone to share the burden, even if you are not gifted with prophecy, standing in the magic circle and sharing the burden, you can cut the remaining backlash in half. But when the Dragon Clan makes a prophecy, the backlash is relatively strong. Can we find a few more dragons to share the backlash? Adult dragons and mature dragons are also fine. If we set up a magic circle, the mage tower can use manpower. Gretel counted them one by one with his fingers. Sains only felt a buzzing in his ears, buzzing non-stop, and even the river of time in front of him seemed to have a double image. He was so annoyed that he shouted. Stop arguing. 10 times the materials, 1 prophecy, let them bring their own things and set up the magic circle. Up to 5 times a month. Yeah. Greet happily flew out his force field hand and slapped Elder Batista hard.